You're listening to There Ought to Be a Law, the Center for Auto Safety podcast with Executive Director Michael Brooks, Chief Engineer Fred Perkins, and hosted by me, Anthony Cimino. For over 50 years, the Center for Auto Safety has worked to make cars safer. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode. Today is Wednesday, October 22nd, and this is another episode of Waymo. Womo. Womo? Woo. Anyway, we got a lot of Waymo stories. Starting with one from Reuters. U.S. investigates Waymo robotaxis over safety around school buses. So they say that autonomous vehicles are going to get them to drive like us, but better. And these Waymos, unfortunately, drive like the assholes of us. Quoting from the article, NHTSA said the Office of Defects Investigation opened the review after flagging a media report describing an incident in which a Waymo autonomous vehicle did not remain stationary when approaching a school bus with its red light flashing, stop arm deployed, and crossing control arm extended. The report said the Waymo vehicle initially stopped beside the bus, then maneuvered around its front, passing the extended stop arm and crossing control arm while students were disembarking. So that's a ticket.
Not much of an endorsement for AI driving vehicles, is it?
Yeah, I think I think this came out of Atlanta from the Waymos that are being tested there. I'm not sure. It's hard keeping track of everywhere these vehicles are. I'm not sure if they're driving without a safety driver in Atlanta at this point. But from what it looked like, there was a partial video of the incident that really just captured the Waymo kind of pulling away from the school bus. But it looked like there was a side road or a driveway essentially perpendicular to the road that the school bus was on. The school bus had stopped, was letting off passengers, in the general area of that side road that the Waymo was on. And the Waymo didn't appear to recognize that there was a school bus there. Maybe it saw a school bus, but it certainly didn't see or couldn't respond to the stop arm, the flashing of the school bus, the crossing arm, all those things that, when a human sees a school bus in that position, most of us are very aware that we need to stop and just hold our position until the crossing arm, it goes away, the flashing lights stop, and the school bus pulls off. The Waymo instead kind of maneuvered and pulled out in front of the bus and around it in order to make a left turn and then drive on down the road. So, apparently that's, I think, $1,000 fine or something in Georgia. And, here we have another situation where not only is a autonomous vehicle making some seriously questionable decisions that could result in a safety problem, but we also have an inability for state authorities to do anything to regulate that behavior. And even if they did, giving Waymo a $1,000 fine is, less than peanuts. So, a lot of problems here. NHTSA's looking into it. You see things like this, and what I fully expect to happen next is Waymo saying, "Oh, we already changed our software to fix this. Blah blah blah. This is done," and NHTSA closes the investigation. So, I sometimes I wonder, why, is NHTSA looking deeply enough into some of these violations on the part of not just Waymo but other autonomous vehicle companies?
So if I do this, I get a fine plus points on my license. Does Waymo get points on their license? Because they have, it's the Waymo driver or the Aurora driver or
they don't have a license. So
yeah, how does
there's nothing to put points on.
Yes, this is the problem. Because I do this and my insurance skyrockets. In New York State, you get after a certain number of points on your license, they take your license away. And as far as I can tell, Waymo doesn't have a license for a reason, because it would have way too many points on its license.
I don't know. I guess this is the problem with a lot of states autonomous vehicle legislation. A lot of that legislation was passed based on, principles that were handed to them by the industry itself, where they basically have to, acquire insurance and check a few boxes saying they're going to be safe. But what the states are not doing in this, rush to get these vehicles on the streets is assigning liability for the computer driver and, essentially treating that computer driver like a licensed driver and giving it penalties, points. There is no enforcement system around autonomous driving at the moment in almost any states. I mean, I guess you could argue that California and has done that with some recent laws they've passed, but that's incomplete and hasn't been put into effect yet. So it's a huge problem, and I think if you saw some significant fines in these situations, and $1,000 isn't going to deter a multi-billion-dollar manufacturer. You're going to need to see significant penalties and punishments if you make this type of movement on a public road in Georgia in an autonomous vehicle. Why are you still allowed to operate? Is my question. Shouldn't you be suspending the operation until they've rectified this problem and proven to authorities that this isn't something that's going to happen again, and things like this won't happen again? And I other than kind of this rush to innovate that you see kind of capture legislators in passing these laws, I don't see any reason why these systems aren't being set up to ensure that enforcement is taking place.
So I've got a question for you related to that. Most of the public relations announcements from Waymo will say that Waymo is 5 times safer or 5 times less collisions than human drivers. What does that even mean? Does that mean that if Waymo has one bad collision, they get 5 good collisions? I just don't understand. It almost leaves me speechless, which is unusual for me, but it's just crazy. How does that work? I mean, if you violate one safety announcement from a school bus and you drive past one and you kill a kid, does that mean you got 5 more to go before you get credit for that one kid you've killed? What does this even mean? We're in a strange universe where language is meaningless.
I will note just one correction. I said, I wasn't aware if there's a safety operator in the vehicle. There was no safety operator in the vehicle, according to NHTSA. So that's part of the resume. So apparently Waymo is testing without safety operators in Georgia at this point.
Hey, they're no Tesla. Waymo operates in California, and California law requires all motor vehicles to have car insurance, or all drivers to have car insurance. Does Waymo have car insurance, or are they allowed to bypass that? Or has Alphabet decided to start their own insurance company to insure their own fleet? That's
the way I believe it's written in most states, that is that manufacturers have to basically, if you're testing AVs in California, I know they have to put up like a $5 million insurance bond.
per
So they're
vehicle.
essentially total, which is, not even enough technically to cover what NHTSA says is the cost of one life, right? That's problematic for a lot of reasons. I mean, we think that insurance bond should be significantly higher.
And that costs next to nothing to get that.
Yeah, and well, I assume that most of these manufacturers are self-insuring there, but who knows? Maybe they're buying, it wouldn't be a very large policy. I mean, that's $5 million or something you might commonly see on, individual humans' umbrella policies for their home insurance or their car, something like that. So that's not a lot, and that's not going to cover, that's certainly not going to cover an incident where an autonomous vehicle crashes into, a group of people, or it's never $5 million is not a lot at all for these companies to have to put up. So even in California, where they have, in the most restrictive regulations in the country around autonomous vehicles. You're seeing a severe lack of enforcement, or in this case, surety provided by the manufacturer that if there is a problem that takes place, they're going to be able to at least compensate victims or their families.
Yeah, but isn't it true, Michael, that even if there is insurance, that's no guarantee somebody's going to get paid for an injury caused by some device. You still got to go through lots of hoops and hurdles. So, this
right, like getting around the mandatory arbitration clauses in the contract you sign with Waymo when you get in the car, right?
Well, right, yeah, there's little things like that. Also, the fact that the school children you're going to run over have not signed any agreements that allows them to, get compensated for whatever injuries they get out of that vehicle, right? It's got to go through a whole lot of legal activity in order for any of them to get paid. Isn't it so? So the insurance, the fact that they posted a bond for, X millions of dollars, to me seems pretty irrelevant to the human circumstances of somebody being injured by one of these deadly vehicles.
The reason I asked for the insurance question is because that's part of what keeps human drivers, I mean, in theory at least, and auto manufacturers trying to be as honest and safe as possible. Because if your car fails because of some issue with the manufacturer of the car, the insurance premiums on that type of car will be more expensive than other ones. If you get into accidents, speeding tickets and whatnot, your insurance premiums go up. If Waymo and these other companies don't have that oversight of the insurance industry, whatever effect that has, that's just another part of what every other road user, every other driver deals with. That's one less, oversight. I couldn't imagine Geico being like, yeah, go ahead. There's no human in the car. We'll insure it. That sounds great. We have a lizard as our mascot.
I guess you could just see that as one less layer of protection. Right now we have zero federal standards around autonomous vehicles. The state standards are clearly lacking and insufficient, and insurers don't have any, they're not heavyweights in that industry because the AV manufacturers aren't using the major car insurers, and they're not going to be punished by those insurers for violating traffic laws or for getting into crashes and other things. So, the AV industry has exactly what they want in that regard, and they're, surging towards trying to get more federally in Congress by, essentially getting preempted from state laws that could tackle some of these problems. So it's, quite literally, we are in the Wild West with this stuff. And, I think we're there in a lot of areas involving AI and other things. But, when it comes to cars, there is no question, that there simply aren't enough state and federal regulations around these companies to help ensure safety for any of us. It's not just the people in Teslas that are at risk. It's everyone on the roads. And, Waymos are essentially a computer that threatens, could threaten us all if they're not operating properly. And, certainly in this case in Georgia, posed a threat to the children exiting that school bus.
Where's the nearest insurance lobbyist when you need one? Continuing with Waymo, let's go to the District of Columbia. So Waymo wants to put its autonomous vehicles out on the road of DC, but then this big orange smear is like, we're shutting the government down. Part of that is cutting off funding to the District of Columbia that was going to have a safety study around how autonomous technology would work on DC streets. Now, this is good that they wanted to do this study because, how do autonomous vehicles deal with, I don't know, a presidential motorcade? Because they can't handle a flashing stop line on a school bus. I imagine the Secret Service would be like, oh, we need these pieces of crap out of our way, or some other dignitary, something like that. So unfortunately, it looks like, unfortunately, I kid myself. It looks like the Waymo deployment in DC will be delayed unless Mr. Brooks is going to tell me there's some loophole around that and the Secret Service will blow them all up.
Yeah.
No.
What, did I cut off your joke?
No, it was not a joke.
I mean, this is, some of the folks in the article appears to be leading us to the conclusion that this is directly related to the government shutdowns, or to budget cuts. But it looks, to me, it looks like this study was never really started. May have been delayed anyway. Regardless of who became president in January, it's not clear that this study was something that was going to happen on Waymo's timeline. Although, I personally have been interested in seeing Waymo's launch in DC because that's the closest city to me where I could, observe their behavior.
I mean, I think Fred and I and you as well, Michael, pointed out the absurdity of some DC streets. I would love to see an autonomous vehicle navigate streets that run parallel to themselves, in the same direction, a block apart from each other.
DC has a lot of interesting roads and streets. I mean, I don't know how unique it is in terms. I know there are a lot of more circles and diagonal type roads running around DC that make it somewhat unique. But I don't see it as the type of unique environment that AVs would struggle with as I do someplace like New York City, where you have just this crush of humanity that's unlike anywhere else in the United States. The district is, although it has its, transportation, some interesting things going on, I guess, in terms of, Congress and, a lot of different police forces operating and lots of parks and, weird spots and traffic. I don't see it as kind of a driving environment that poses any peculiar challenges in the way that places with a lot different weather patterns or places with a lot more elevation and elevation changes would pose for driverless vehicles.
I don't know. I don't think the logic is going to handle cabinet secretary swimming in sewage very well. That was on the Rock Creek Parkway, so there's got to be some special accommodations for Washington.
Yeah, only jeans, no shirts. Continuing the world of autonomous vehicles. Hey, guys, you'd never think this was possible. I'm talking to listeners. The person overseeing autonomous vehicles is somebody who came from the autonomous vehicle world. We've talked about Mr. Morrison before. Is he now the bullhead of NHTSA, Michael?
Yes, he is confirmed, and he's running the agency.
Yeah, so before this, he was a lawyer working for a fruit company out in California called Apple, and he was working on their self-driving vehicle. And this is funny from an article in Jacobian. I'm going to quote, when confronted by lawmakers at his nomination hearing, he declined to discuss the work he did for Apple, refusing questions about whether he was involved in Project Titan, their self-driving car project. I love this. Like, you're getting nominated for public office. Yeah, I'm not answering that. No.
Yeah, that's really my biggest problem there. Like, you're not even willing to disclose whether or not you worked for an autonomous vehicle company. Yeah, I worked for Apple, but I can't tell you if I worked on the car.
I was in the t-shirt department. Like, come on.
And I mean, it's pretty obvious he did. I think, he came from NHTSA to Apple. I mean, and at the time they were trying to launch a self-driving car. I don't think there's any question that that's what happened there. But, while Morrison was awaiting confirmation and wasn't in the building at NHTSA, Peter Simshauser, their chief counsel, was effectively acting as the administrator of the agency, and he came from Motional, which is also an autonomous vehicle company. So, it's pretty clear how the administration is approaching safety at NHTSA. That's by putting people from industry into positions regulating safety or not regulating safety, as the case may be.
This episode brought to you by Fox and Hen House, the new animated series explaining how our government works. The Fox and the Hen House.
Yeah, I mean, and this is nothing new, right? I mean, we've had a revolving door between industry and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, amongst many other government agencies, since probably since before, at least two of us were alive, maybe before even Fred was around on this earth. So it's become, we haven't ever seen them directly nominated to the position of administrator, but we have seen a lot of folks moving back and forth in the chief counsel's office from industry and into, other positions in research or in enforcement. I'm struggling to remember if there was an actual administrator that came from the industry. I mean, the closest thing I think we saw to that was Andy Card being George W. Bush's chief of staff. He wasn't, at NHTSA, but the president's chief of staff also being from General Motors is obviously going to have some impact there. But so this is somewhat a new thing with a administrator of NHTSA coming directly from an autonomous vehicle company. But we can't confirm that since Morrison's unwilling to break the non-disclosure agreement, or I think tellingly willing to, he wasn't required to, sell his Apple stock that he accumulated during that time period in order to take a job regulating the industry he was in. So there's obviously all sorts of conflicts there.
Wonderful civil servants. All right. Let's get on to something that really burns my eyes. Yeah. Headlights. The Insurance Institute for Highway Safety has finally listened to my complaints that I bring up all the time about the goddamn headlights blinding me all the time, increasing glare, but they got it wrong because their article's titled "Headlight Complaints Abound, but Glare-Related Crashes Haven't Increased." Sure, I have not crashed, but I feel like crashing every time I'm blinded. Quoting from this, although it can certainly be uncomfortable, headlight glare contributes to far fewer crashes than insufficient visibility, IIHS President David Harkey said, but that doesn't mean reducing glare isn't an important goal, one that we've long focused on at IIHS, and in addition to approving illumination. Now, I think that's great, and I'm frankly shocked that this has not led to more crashes.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the biggest issues that I've always wondered about here. We've heard a lot in the last few years, particularly from folks who are saying that glare is a big safety issue. But when you go and look at the data and try to find incidents of glare contributing to crashes, they're very difficult to find. And, IIHS, did exactly that. They went back and looked at about the last 10 years, I think 2015 to 2023. So 9 years, they took data from 11 states. I think there were millions of crashes involved here. And they found, I think they found one, maybe two crashes related to glare out of every 1,000 of those crashes. But, I think significantly, and this is the point that David Harkey makes, in that quote, the bright lights on a vehicle are necessary to provide drivers with visibility at night, and lack of visibility is much, much, much more likely to cause a crash than glare. And when you look at it that way, and everything we see in the industry and in auto safety, there are some trade-offs, right? We talk about them all the time. There's a trade-off, between the type of windows on the side of your car. You're not going to be able to escape through a window that is made of safety glass, but at the same time, it's going to keep you in the vehicle in a crash and prevent you from being ejected. And the numbers essentially show that there's a low chance of being trapped in a vehicle and having to escape through the glass versus a very high chance of people being ejected through that glass. And so in order to meet side impact protection standards, manufacturers have been moving from tempered glass to glass that is essentially much harder to break in a collision, and also hard to break when you need to escape the vehicle. But overall, at the higher levels, looking at safety, you'll see that that's going to ultimately save more lives, even though some people aren't going to be able to escape the vehicle. I think there are probably some ways we could improve that, and we certainly. Egress from a car is very important to us. So we have a problem with the way that's gone. But on the other side here with lights, you see a lot of deadly crashes happen at night. I think it's more than, even though nighttime periods. There isn't as much night in the United States as there is daytime over the course of a year. We see, I think, 51% or greater deadly crashes happen at night, and a lot of that is due to poor visibility. And so lights are, incredibly important. And the IIHS's study is showing that glare, is going down, according to their study, going down significantly over the last 10 years. And there's no change in how often glare is mentioned in crash reports. So, it may just be that, a lot of us, like Anthony, have problems with glare. As we age, we all, our macular degeneration happens.
I see what you did there.
Our eyes start to be more sensitive to light, more sensitive to these types of things. And, they say in the article that most of the complaints about glare are coming from older adults. And
he's gaslighting me.
Yeah. Well, look, and a lot of the complaints about glare are coming from people who aren't involved in a crash either. The glare blocks their visibility briefly, and they are, complaining about it, but even in the absence of a negative safety impact. So I'm not trying to poo-poo it too much. It's certainly a factor in some crashes. But I think that having lights that are bright enough to show the road, and on top of this, having, we know that advanced driving beams or adaptive driving beams are coming to America at some point. They've been in Europe for a decade. Hopefully they'll get here at some point. We've had some issues due to our due to NHTSA's inability to get rulemakings out in a timely manner, frankly. But when, I think adaptive driving beams are going to rectify a lot of this. I don't think we'll ever get to a point where, all vehicle headlights are perfect and no one is going to be affected by glare. But I think we're moving in the right direction here. And the IIHS study confirms to a pretty large extent that glare is not a massive factor in crashes and is far outweighed by the need for, visibility at night.
Two things about that. The first is that IIHS study did not consider the impact of daylight running lights. And the fact that the lights are bright makes cars more visible during the day. So that may well be a compensating factor as well. And the second is, Anthony, do you have a "keep off my damn lawn" sign up in front of your apartment building?
I live in an apartment building. I don't even have a lawn. Keep off my damn. Yeah, this show's over. This is.
Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting point, I guess, for another reason. I think IIHS was, looking at nighttime only in their study, but daytime running lights are required in Canada to make cars more visible. The United States has refused to do that. And I think there are numerous studies showing that daytime lighting on vehicles really helps with daytime visibility and can prevent crashes. And there's no, a lot of cars already have them. It's not like it's a significant financial commitment by manufacturers to get them on cars. I'm, yet again, wondering, what the holdup is on requiring those in American cars.
I think my issue is, well, there's many issues I have, but this I think might be more of and Fred, you've pointed this out in the past, is the angle that these headlights are shown. They're aimed not necessarily at the road, but they're aimed inside my skull. And that's the part I don't enjoy. Whether the vehicle's behind me and all of a sudden I feel like I'm being abducted by aliens, or they're coming at me and I feel like, good thing I'm not a moth today because I would die.
Yeah. I mean, there's just so many things there that could be the problems, right? I mean, there's incompatibility between vehicle heights. So, all of us have seen big pickup trucks that are shining directly into our eyes, right? There are people approaching you or behind you who have their brights on and who just simply don't give a damn about everybody else on the road, or are clueless, one or the other. So there are a lot of, and even if if there's a crash, and IIHS points this out in the study, if there is a crash, the car that with the bright lights that, caused the glare and potentially caused the crash is gone, right? They're not stopping. They might not even be aware there was a crash.
They couldn't see it, just nothing.
Yeah, and so there's no proof there of, were their headlights not properly calibrated, where their headlights not aimed properly, where their brights on. You don't have a lot of answers there because these crashes are very difficult to study.
Well, with that, gentlemen, I think it's time for now. Actually, before that, if you agree with Michael and this isn't a big deal, go to autosafety.org, click on donate, and donate in an amount that ends in 0. If you think I'm right and you want to join me in a revolution and put signs on our front lawns, donate an amount that ends in a 5.
Well, what I think you should be doing is pushing for, the United States to write a regulation and, that allows adaptive driving beams into vehicles in America. That's really the problem, is that we have an archaic regulatory scheme around headlights at this point that's not allowing for innovative designs that can, make visibility at night better by seeing around curves and other things, but also automatically dimming bright lights when there are other cars around and things like that. I mean, the potential for a lot of really good things happening with adaptive driving beams is there. They just have to be allowed on the United States roads.
I had a Kia rental car that had the adaptive lights that would turn on brights and turn them off. And I loved it.
That's pretty great.
It was cool. Yeah. But anyway, let's jump into gaslight. Because I feel like I was just gaslighted personally, but that's okay. I'm getting over it. Fred, what's your gaslight? His gaslight is the mute button.
It's on now, Anthony. Okay. That's not a gaslight. That's an on button. Okay, so my friends at Kodiak have announced, Kodiak is a company that's making computer-driven trucks, heavy trucks. And they've announced that based on analysis by NATO, that they are a winner in, let's see, what is this category? The Kodiak driver, Kodiak's AI-driven autonomous system, earned a Viera score of 98, tying for the top spot among the more than 1,000 commercial fleets in NATO's network. All right, that's very interesting. So what the hell is NATO?
Yeah, that's what I want to know.
It turns out that NATO is a surprisingly predictive AI company that is selling predictive AI attached to a camera that they clip onto the rearview mirror of these trucks. So the predictive AI is predicting that the predictive AI of Kodiak is better than all the other trucks around that do not use predictive AI, because there just aren't a lot of fleets doing that.
These are 18-wheelers,
What could possibly go wrong with this?
Lots of things.
So they do not go on to specify exactly who is included in the study, whether or not they're comparing apples and oranges or computers to human beings or, potatoes to cucumbers. Who the hell knows what they're doing? But they're very sure that they're really good, and they're very happy on to be able to tell people how exactly good they are. So based upon the fact that there's absolutely no data presented to show what the hell they are or who they're doing it, I'm going to give them my gaslight nomination this week.
Excellent. Well done. Mr. Brooks.
So this week again, I'm following Anthony's lead, since Anthony, continually, lambasted, asset managers, investor advisors. I've got another one this week, and this one is, wild in that I don't know, it's a gaslight. He's gaslighting himself. He's gaslighting us. I'm not sure, but it's Gene Munster. Maybe it's Gene Munster of Deepwater Asset Management, talking about the investigation that NHTSA opened into Tesla full self-driving a couple of weeks back. He says the NHTSA probe is actually good for Tesla because it could be a testament to Tesla's efforts in developing autonomous driving technology. And he says Tesla just stands alone in this category of consumer autonomy. And with that quote, I completely agree. Tesla does just stand alone in this category of consumer autonomy because they're the only manufacturer deploying it recklessly and without regard for a lot of the science behind how humans interact with partially autonomous vehicles. They're the only manufacturer that is reporting, thousands of crashes to NHTSA related to level 2 vehicles. And they are, quite frankly, it's obvious. Yes, they do stand alone. They are the least safe company touting autonomy by a country mile. And so, even though that's not how Mr. Munster intended for me to interpret his statement, I'm going to interpret it that way because to interpret it otherwise is simply nonsense. And for that, Gene gets my gaslight of the week.
Oh, well done. I mean, I don't even have to go. Michael, you already won. Gene Munster, come on, off the bat. But I'm going to go anyway. Same article. This is from Benzinga. It's a safe website to go to. Don't worry. It talks about how Tesla has rolled out something called Mad Max mode for their full self-driving system. So in their latest release, 14.1.2, they introduced a new speed profile, Mad Max, which comes with higher speeds and more frequent lane changes than Hurry. Wait, what? So first of all, they had a mode called Hurry, and then now they have one called Mad Max. And this is a company saying, we're the safest vehicles on the road. What is happening here? There's definitely cognitive dissonance. There's should we all just be on ketamine? Is that is that the only way this makes sense? So
it doesn't make sense to me. I mean, you continually see, Tesla's been under fire from NHTSA on a number of occasions and had to do recalls for violating traffic laws. I think the California rolling stop was one of the first times a few years back when they were called before NHTSA on a problem like that. And here they are, a Mad Max mode apparently allows for vehicles to violate speed limits and essentially weave around and inside and out of traffic. I think I saw a video on this where the Tesla was passing someone on the right, which is, a problem. And especially when you're well over the speed limit. But Tesla is essentially programming vehicles not to be good drivers or responsible drivers. And that's a huge problem. But sorry, I interrupted your gaslight.
No, that you're absolutely right. Apparently Tesla's next release is going to be called Masshole. Every time it goes to turn left, it'll put on the right blinker. That's our gaslights for this week. Still Tesla spread that seemed to hurt you as a Massachusetts resident.
I'm just astonished to be living in a time when people who control access to information choose to lie and present a completely false image of reality in order to promote their own products that are killing people. It's just, I don't know, it's like Soylent. It's just, I'm left speechless. I don't know how to do this. And, they're savaging any independent news sources, National Public Radio, they're savaging the public TV. They're even savaging private news companies that choose to deliver unbiased facts. Sorry, I'm ranting.
No,
but I'm astonished that I'm living in this age.
We all are. Anyway, speaking of that news agency stuff, continuing another Tesla piece, 60 Minutes Australia, which is similar to the US-based news show, except that their pieces are much longer, it seems. The US version of the show is like each segment's like 7 minutes, and 3 of that is just, playing a Ghost of Morley Safer. Whereas this one, they did one that's about a half-hour segment on Tesla, because full self-driving is coming to Australia, and they really do a pretty good deep dive into this on Australian roads, including the, we don't have to go too far into it. It's fun. There's a link to it. And the host is in the car with some guy who's works in the auto industry. He's a fanboy, or I'm not really sure. Fanboy sounds rude, but he's excited for this stuff to come. And the Tesla drives off the highway beyond signs that say "Do not enter construction zone," and keeps going. Like, hey, I only need cameras to see where I'm going, but I just can't interpret what I'm seeing. Tesla.
Yeah, I mean, there's a problem there, and Australia is interesting. In the story, they said that currently Australian law doesn't allow for vehicles that are higher than an SAE level 2 to operate. And so full self-driving is only a level 2 system, according to Musk in Australia. It's an interesting for a few reasons as well. I mean, you'll see in the story, they talk a lot about the case that just wrapped up in Florida, or the trial portion of the case wrapped up in Florida. And they did an interview with the young man who was injured in that crash. His girlfriend was killed. And you see, what they went through as, just innocent parties sitting at a three-way stop looking at the stars, and all of a sudden a car comes out of the darkness and kills her and significantly injures him. A lot of good commentary in the story from Missy Cummings, who was a former guest of the show, and from Brett Schreiber, who was the attorney who handled that case in Florida. But ultimately, I mean, it's there are a lot of questions that are going to be raised in Australia around these vehicles, just like there are being raised in the United States around these vehicles right now. And I just wonder why some countries that have seen what has happened in the United States with Tesla are not more leery of allowing those vehicles to be imported into their countries. I think Australia had a chance to say, "Hey, we don't want this shit in our country," and they missed their opportunity. I think that's something that's going to happen as more of these whiz-bang tech features are sold and drive companies' stock prices and become more and more commonplace.
It's funny. You can see the US 60 Minutes puff piece on full self-driving from like 2018, and Elon's driving around hands-free, and the US host is just like, "This is amazing, the world we live in." And you see the Australian version like, "This is insanity. Why are we allowing this?" So just for that comparison, it's great. Leslie Stahl, please donate.
But they already gave that's another difference between Aussie 60 Minutes and the United States version, is that their parent company isn't capitulating to the president.
True.
Right?
Yeah. Continuing with that political thread, the Washington Post had this long article that maybe we can get into. I don't know how deeply, but it basically talks about English proficiency testing for commercial truck drivers. And the Trump administration and their people are basically trying to pull over, immigrants and non-native English speakers, and be like, you can't drive here because your English isn't proficient enough. And reading this, my reaction is, well, I mean, yeah, if you're driving an 18-wheeler, I want you to be able to at least read road signs where you're going, right, and all sorts of random signs that pop up of like temporary construction zone and different warnings like that. And that makes sense to me. That I'm on board with. But this also, it seems that it's arbitrary how they decide whose English is proficient enough. And it seems that it's left up to highway patrol, and some states like Texas might have a couple of racists on the police force. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, look, you see something like this, and to me, it immediately suggests that there's another motive here. I think most reasonable people can agree here that the Trump administration is not out there super concerned about the safety of Americans. Otherwise, they'd be doing a lot more about other issues. They keep highlighting this one crash that happened in August in Florida, where a guy, I think from India, who failed an English language proficiency test, made a legal U-turn and killed 3 people. So I agree. I think that commercial truck drivers operating these massive vehicles should have to read and understand English road signs. But at the same time, there's just the way this is being enforced and the way it was rolled out. One of the first things that the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration kind of did, and Sean Duffy kind of did after getting in place, is to go after immigrants, which has been a drumbeat for the whole the current administration. Yes, maybe this helps safety to some extent, but I'm very skeptical of the underpinnings of why they're doing this.
A fascinating article. If you have access, please read it. And for now, let's jump into the dulcet tones of our own Frederick Perkins. Is it Frederick on your birth certificate?
I'm sorry. What?
Is it Frederick on your birth certificate?
It is.
Ah, all right. There we go.
It is. Yes.
Cow time.
All right. So what we've talked about last week a little bit is the checklist for regulators. And so I just want to talk about why this is necessary. It's all about risk, okay? And risk is related to safety. And all of the developers will say, well, we conform to all applicable safety standards. True, it is. So what are those safety standards? Well, in the U.S. Code, 49 U.S.C. 30102A9, defines motor vehicle safety is the performance of a motor vehicle or motor vehicle equipment in a way that protects the public against unreasonable risk of accidents occurring because of design, construction, etc. Well, that means basically you're relying on what's reasonable. And who's to say, right? So if you look at other standards, there's something called ISO 26262, which defines safety as the absence of unreasonable risk. All right, that doesn't give you a lot of new information. So let's go to the United Nations, UNECE. They say that they don't even define safety. What they do say is safety case means a structured argument supported by a body of evidence to provide compelling, comprehensive, and valid case that the ADS is or will be free from unreasonable risk for a given application. So in this case, you don't even have to be safe if, reasonably safe if you say you're going to be in the future. So there's a lot of ambiguity here, and they all rely upon reasonableness without saying what that means. So when people say they comply with all regulations, basically they're saying, we think what we're doing is reasonable. Yet the developers won't reveal what they think reasonable means. NHTSA should do this. NHTSA has done that with the Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards for conventional cars. They refuse to adapt those standards to computer-driven vehicles. So that leaves the developers themselves, the courts via tort law settlements, and state regulators. Well, developers won't do it because what they think it means is we don't have to do anything. We don't have to tell you what we're doing. And so screw yourself. The courts can only act after tragedies happen, right? If nothing happens, there's nothing to litigate. So that leaves regulators, especially state permitting agencies, to evaluate the risk profile of these computer-driven vehicles they're asked to license. There is a way of doing that called comprehensive safety case analysis using standards like UL 4600, but that takes a lot of time and energy. Even to read it, it's hundreds of pages and it requires a lot of effort. Legislators are overworked. They don't have time to go in and dive into a multi-hundred-page document to consider what the developers are whispering in the ear is completely safe. Nothing to see here, folks. Let's move on. So while this is not perfect, we've developed a concise checklist for regulator use that identifies the key risk factors that safe computer-driven vehicles have to consider in the interest of public safety. And of course, we're happy to share that with people. It's still under development here, but let's go into a few of the topics. So these are all yes or no questions, binary answers. And the first couple are, has the applicant followed the technology readiness level validation process to assure safe and reliable operation? A technology readiness level validation process has been developed over 20 years for various government programs. DOT has signed on to this. Waymo has signed on to this in a document produced by the Government Accountability Office. So it's a reasonable question to ask. If you do conform to it, you have very high confidence that the vehicle will be appropriate and safe. So have they done that? Yes or no? Simple answer. Next one is, has the applicant developed and validated compliance with a comprehensive safety case analysis for its computer-driven vehicle offering? Well, we talked about that a little bit earlier. Computer safety case analysis is available if you do something like comply with Underwriters Laboratory 4600, which involves independent verification of how the vehicle has been developed and produced and what standards it conforms to. So for the legislator or the regulator, a simple question: has the applicant done that or not? Next one is, has the applicant shown his computer-driven vehicle offering has passed a safety case audit by competent and qualified independent auditors? Well, most people think that that's an absolute requirement for a safe computer-driven vehicle offering. And I say computer-driven vehicle rather than level 1, level 2, level X, level Y, or AV, because all of the computer-driven vehicles that allow for sustained operation for any length of time without human inputs into the control system has similar safety profiles and similar safety consequences if the developer has not done their job properly. So this applies to a broad set, and I didn't want it to be dependent upon the language that the industry itself came up with for what qualifies and what doesn't. Clearly, Tesla's operating in Mad Max mode are subject to the restrictions that computer-driven vehicles should embrace.
So, Fred, I just want to check on that. So, my vehicle, which has adaptive cruise control, lane centering, when I have it in that mode, this would qualify as a computer-driven vehicle.
Yes, it would. And why is that? Because any vehicle that drives itself for long enough to kill you or to kill people outside of the vehicle has got to conform to these safety guidelines, right? That's what it's all about, protecting you and protecting the public.
Okay, so this covers my 4-year-old car all the way up to the Mercedes that will drive itself on city streets, and Ford Blue Cruise, all of Tesla's nonsense. So it's a whole wide swath of vehicles. I mean, you can almost say that it's more or less every vehicle sold in the last couple of years because they all have some level of this. And
I think so. I believe that's right. Yeah. Again, my standard, which is not the industry standard, is, can you kill somebody? Can you injure somebody if your design doesn't work perfectly? I mean, to me, that seems reasonable. Okay. Now, what are the reasonable standards? I don't know. What does the legislator think is reasonable? How many of these do you have to embrace in order to be reasonable? I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that is.
But I think very simply we can say, like, if you sell brakes and the brakes fail, that's unreasonable. The reasonable thing should be that the brakes work when you apply pressure.
Right.
Very simply. Okay.
Seems to, again, the standard is a defect in this particular characteristic cause you to enable you to kill somebody, okay, or to injure somebody. And how often it does that is part of the risk. Remember, risk profiles have two parameters. One is the consequence of the defect, and the other is the probability of it occurring. So what the companies are likely to say is, yeah, well, how often is an AV likely to encounter a school bus from the side with its lights flashing when it comes to a T intersection? Well, the answer would probably be it's not going to happen very often. So the developer could say, well, this is low risk, never going to happen. Yet,
right. But I'm thinking of what you're saying is, like, it has to be perfect. I mean, they already have engineering calculations for how often a brake failure would occur or a steering wheel inputs would fail. So they know this. And when people hear computer driven or autonomous, their brains turn off and don't think of, well, if there's a computer, it's much smarter than us. There's no way to calculate it. This is so much better. But it's really what you're saying is not, we can track this. Similarly, we can track mechanical linkage failures.
Right. And so the purpose of this, again, is to just give regulators a handle on what are the hazards and the risks that are involved in safe operation of these computer-driven vehicles. And remember, there's two aspects of it. There's hazard and there's frequency, right? So as the regulator should consider both. Like, for example, how likely is it that a computer-driven vehicle is going to plow into a group of school children walking in hand behind their kindergarten teacher crossing the street? Well, that's a hazard that you probably don't want to involve in a question of frequency, right? You want to know that that's just really never going to happen. Even though it's a very low probability, you really, really, really don't want that to happen. So the regulators really need to consider both the risk and the hazard, and certain hazards should just be unacceptable in whatever frequency they might occur.
This is great. I'm looking forward to us getting this online in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think we've got enough for now, but I wanted to set the context. And if anyone's got suggestions, if anyone, any of our listeners have suggestions in how to put safety considerations for computer-driven vehicles into a binary context, yes or no, go ahead and send them on to us. We'd love to get your inputs as well.
Contact at autosafety.org, unless you happen to personally know Mr. Michael or Mr. Fred, and you can just email them directly. Or you can just meet them in your local Piggly Wiggly parking lot. They'll be there all weekend. Anyway, let's go into recalls. First up, Nissan. Whoa, 173,301 vehicles. And of course, the first one listed is the Chevrolet City Express. So confusing. The Nissan NV200 Taxi. This is the 2015 to 2018, 2019s. These are vehicles I've never heard of. I don't know what's going on, but a blown fuel pump fuse can interrupt fuel delivery to the engine, potentially causing a loss of motive power. LOMP. Oh, loss of motive power. The acronym is LOMP, preventing the vehicle from restarting and increasing the risk of crash. Oh no. First, Mr. Brooks, what are these vehicles? The NV200?
They're mostly passenger vans, cargo van types, kind of like if you see, a smallish minivan looking vehicle running around, that's, a plumber might use them, a bike or tech repair guy, or a small taxi service. So.
Okay. Moving on to the next one then. Ford. Yeah, Ford. Only 405 vehicles. Come on, Ford. You can do better than that. This is the 2025 Ford Ranger. Non-conforming instrument panel topper components may alter the intended passenger airbag cushion opening and inflation characteristics. Oh, that's a bad one. Uh-oh. So the instrument panel was installed incorrectly? Is that what we're seeing here?
I think this is similar to what we've seen on and a few other recalls, where the instrument panel has to have a particular pattern kind of etched, they call it scoring,
right,
into it, so that the airbags can deploy, essentially through the plastic on the instrument panel. In this case, their airbags are not able to deploy because there was a change in that scoring pattern that was made by the supplier. And so that's essentially preventing the airbags from properly deploying. I don't think they meet motor vehicle safety standards because of that. And so this is a compliance recall. Essentially, Ford's recalling these vehicles. They're relatively new. It looks like this only impacted vehicles that were made on September 9th and 10th of this year. So, there's a chance, I don't know how many of these have actually made it to consumers at the moment, but, you can locate your dates of manufacture and on your vehicle and figure it out from there. Or, this recall's up on this website, so go ahead and check your van to see if you qualify for this recall, because this is, a pretty critical problem, and something you want to get fixed immediately, because if you don't have, it's the passenger airbag. If you don't have, I don't know where I was going with that, but it is the passenger airbag, and it looks like owners are going to be notified about this later this week. So you should be able to get a fix. It looks like sometime in later November. It doesn't look like they have a perfect remedy for this yet, although you would think that would just be a new instrument panel dashboard that doesn't have this problem or that was manufactured to their older specs, but we will see.
So you're not recommending people take a razor blade and create their own scoring marks?
I don't think
Yes,
that's
no?
ideal. No.
Well, what if you don't get it repaired because you're like, I really don't like my passenger and I want to create the perfect crime?
You should be in jail for murder.
Okay, fair enough. Moving on. Next up, Ford. 59,006 vehicles. That's right. That sounds more like Ford. 2020 to 2023 Ford Explorer. 2021 to 2024 Ford Bronco. The 2016 to 2018 Explorer. 2022-24, blah, blah. So many. There's the Escape, the Bronco Sports, the Fusions, the Lincoln Corsair, the Lincoln MK6. In the affected vehicles, the engine block heater may develop a coolant leak through its element pins, which could cause a resistive short circuit when the engine block heater system is plugged in. What is an engine block heater?
It is basically a heater that it warms the engine up prior to you starting it to help it start easier. That would be in like cold weather and other times. So people who live in really cold environments essentially can plug in a block heater before they start their car so that they don't have any problems starting the car. It looks like this one, there's obviously a short here and it could cause an underhood fire. There's a lot of factors here, whether you're plugged into 110 volt electrical supply, whether you have, a GFCI power outlet. But, I think the easy thing to do right now, if you're a consumer and have one of these vehicles, is just not plug in the engine block heater at all, and wait for the fix, which looks like it's going to be a few months. And so this engine block heater may not be helping you out a whole lot this winter. It looks like the remedy owner notification is going to take place in early February. So not a lot of solutions for you folks who are living in extremely cold environments on this one for the next few months. But they are instructing owners not to plug in the block heater. So keep that in mind.
I will not plug in my block heater. All right, next up, Ford. Oh, wow. 291,901 vehicles. Yeah, we're getting in our groove now, Ford. 2020 to 2022 F450 SD, the F250 SD, 350 SD, the 360-degree camera system, a substantial difference in lighting. Come on. One or more of the cameras exposed to significantly different light than the other cameras. The system's automatic exposure compensation, which attempts to balance the overall scene, may cause the camera image to appear severely underexposed or overexposed. Okay, it's not quite the rear view camera. Okay, they've got some fancy multi-lens system going on here.
Well, look at the description of the safety risk, right?
Oh, no.
The customer may not be able to clearly view the area behind the vehicle when using the rear view camera while reversing under. I apologize, Anthony. I didn't mean to include this week. I even left out a very large 1.3 million vehicle Ford recall on rear view cameras this week because I didn't want to trigger you, and here we are.
No, it's okay. This is a much more complex system sounding than the other rear view cameras we've run across. So this is, I'm gonna give them a little bit of a little latitude here. But Mr. Farley, come on the show. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, and this one's got a rather long, remedy period as well. It looks like they've got to create some updated image processing software. And owners are probably not going to be seeing a fix for this until probably April of next year at the earliest, since they're saying the planned owner notification is going to be March 31st of 2026.
Well, people aren't driving these cars until April anyway because their engine block heater doesn't work. All right, last recall. Ford, 1,048 vehicles. The 2024 to 2025 Ford Mustang. Supercharger upgrade kits that were sold as aftermarket accessories for 2024 to 2025 model year 5.0 liter Mustang vehicles included an updated powertrain control module calibration that incorrectly disabled level 2 functional safety features in the PCM. Okay. This huh?
You had a loss for words there.
That's a lot of gobbledygook.
Yeah, and this is basically an aftermarket kit. I mean, it's a supercharger upgrade, and it's for your Mustang that you want to go wild in. But it actually has a powertrain control module calibration that screws up your level 2 functional safety features. So I would assume that's, your adaptive cruise control, that type of thing. It says it could result in, sudden unintended acceleration or unintended vehicle movement. So big problem. And this is an equipment recall, folks. So this is for people who, you've got a 2024, 2025 Mustang. You're going into your dealer and saying, hey, I want to upgrade this bad boy. And you're buying a supercharger upgrade kit. So if you bought that kit and you're using, level 2 features, Ford calls them functional safety features, although, there's a big question as to whether level 2 features have anything to do with safety at this point. You don't want to use this software. You want to uninstall it. You want to get rid of it. It looks like they're going to offer a fix at some point in the future, and you'll be hearing about it, in the next couple of weeks. But, I would say just throw away the supercharger upgrade and drive like a normal human.
No, we don't do that. Anyway, with that, folks, that's another hour and change of your life spent with us in your ears. Well, till next week. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye. See you at the Piggly Wiggly.
Hiya.
For more information, visit www.autosafety.org.